The ongoing tale of Oshikiri. The story begins with Oshikiri, a quiet, awkward young man who lives alone in a massive Western-style mansion. The house is far too large for one person, filled with long hallways, empty rooms, and dark corners that never seem fully lit. Oshikiri claims that his parents are away on business, leaving him alone in the house indefinitely. Almost immediately, strange things begin happening. Visitors who come to the mansion notice unsettling details, doors that are locked from the inside, rooms that appear disturbed, and an overwhelming sense that they are not alone. Oshikiri himself seems nervous and distracted, constantly warning guests not to wander too far inside the house. Eventually, Oshikiri explains why. He claims that there is another version of himself living in the mansion, an Oshikiri from a parallel world. According to him, the house sits at a dimensional crossroads, allowing alternate versions of the same person to slip through. This other Oshikiri, he says, is violent and unstable. Whenever someone enters the house, Oshikiri fears that his counterpart might appear and kill them. As proof, bodies begin appearing. People who visit the mansion are found murdered, sometimes mutilated, sometimes brutally beaten, and Oshikiri insists he isn't responsible. He claims the other Oshikiri crosses over, commits the killings, and then disappears. However, cracks begin forming in his story. Witnesses recall seeing Oshikiri himself acting strangely. His personality shifts, his speech becomes erratic. At times, he seems genuinely terrified, at others, disturbingly calm. Later encounters suggest that Oshikiri may not be switching places with another self, but instead dissociating, creating an alternate identity to justify his actions. By the end of the story, it is no longer clear whether the parallel world Oshikiri ever existed at all. What remains is a house soaked in blood, a young man living alone with his guilt, and the horrifying possibility that the real monster was never from another dimension, but born entirely from within. Cloth teacher. A new teacher named Mr. Nikaido takes charge of a middle school class. He is soft-spoken, calm, and rarely raises his voice. However, the students quickly notice something unusual about him. No matter the weather, Mr. Nikaido wears thick layers of clothing, coats, scarves, long sleeves, completely covering his body. His movements are stiff, and his face is almost always partially hidden. Despite the strange appearance, he performs his duties normally at first, and school continues as usual. Problems begin when students start misbehaving. Instead of assigning detention or scolding them, Mr. Nikaido introduces his own method of punishment. He pulls long strips of cloth from beneath his clothes and wraps the misbehaving students tightly, immobilizing their arms, legs, and sometimes even their mouths. The students are forced to stand in front of the class, bound in cloth, unable to move. He claims this method teaches discipline and reflection. School staff allow it, believing it is harmless. After receiving the cloth punishment, students begin acting differently. They become quiet, withdrawn, and unnaturally obedient. Some complain of feeling tightness around their bodies even after being unwrapped. Others develop an intense fear of being exposed and begin wearing multiple layers of clothing even during hot weather. Their personalities slowly fade and they stop questioning authority. Meanwhile, more students are punished and the classroom atmosphere grows tense and silent. Eventually, the truth about Mr. Nikaido is revealed. Beneath his layers of clothing, there is no human body. His entire form is made of cloth, endlessly wrapped upon itself. He explains that cloth exists to restrain and control, and that freedom leads to disorder. According to him, wrapping students removes rebellion and brings peace. He sees his actions not as cruelty, but as education. As time passes, students who receive punishment are wrapped longer and more tightly. Some are never fully unwrapped. The classroom becomes eerily quiet as students disappear or lose their sense of individuality. The story ends with the implication that the students are being absorbed into the teacher's cloth form, losing their identities entirely. Mr. Nikaido remains in the classroom, continuing his lessons as more students submit to his control. Window next door. The story follows a family who moves into a new home in a residential area. From the outside, the house seems normal, but once inside, an unusual feature becomes impossible to ignore. One of the home's second-floor windows faces directly into the neighboring house's window. The distance between the two windows is so small that a person could easily lean out and touch the opposite frame. There is no alley, no yard, just a narrow gap barely wide enough for air to pass through. At first, the family finds it uncomfortable, but assumes they will get used to it. Not long after moving in, the family notices the man who lives next door. He is often standing at his window, staring straight into theirs. He doesn't wave, he doesn't speak, he simply watches. Whenever someone approaches the window, the man is already there, motionless, his face close to the glass. His expression never changes. The family becomes uneasy, but they try to avoid confrontation. Over time, the man's presence becomes more frequent. He begins appearing at all hours, early morning, late at night, sometimes standing there for hours without moving. Even when the lights are turned off, his silhouette remains visible. The family closes the curtains, but they still feel watched. Occasionally, they hear faint noises coming from the narrow space between the houses, scraping, breathing, or subtle movement. One night, a family member opens the curtains slightly and sees the neighbor closer than ever, his face pressed against the glass. His eyes are wide open. He is smiling. After that, things worsen. The man begins tapping lightly on the window. At first, it's slow and irregular, but soon it becomes rhythmic. When the family pulls away, the tapping continues. The space between the houses seems darker than it should be, swallowing light. Eventually, the family realizes something is wrong with the narrow gap between the buildings. Looking closely, they notice that the man is no longer always visible inside his house. Sometimes his face appears from angles that shouldn't be possible, as if he is inside the gap itself. At one point, they glimpse his body squeezed unnaturally between the walls, his limbs bent at impossible angles. Despite the impossibility of fitting there, he seems comfortable, as if the space was made for him. The family learns that the man next door has been slowly forcing himself into the gap, compressing his body day after day. He has been living there. The narrow space has become his world. His body has adapted, flattening and reshaping itself to survive between the walls. His face, once human, now looks distorted and stretched. He continues staring through the window because it is the only opening left to him. In the final moments, the family realizes the terrifying implication. The man is not trying to scare them. He is trying to get closer. The story ends with the suggestion that the gap will eventually close entirely, crushing him or forcing him into the family's home through the window. The last image lingers on his unmoving face, still watching, still waiting. Gentle Goodbye. The story centers on a young woman who visits the home of her close friend. From the moment she arrives, something feels wrong. The house is silent, heavy. The air is thick with mourning. She soon learns the reason. Her friend's father has recently passed away. Despite this, the family behaves strangely calm. Too calm. There is grief, but it feels restrained, almost delayed. They explain that the father is still inside the house. The visitor is led to a room where the father's body lies. He has not been buried. He has not been cremated. Instead, his corpse rests peacefully, carefully preserved, dressed neatly as if he were only sleeping. The family insists that they are not ready to say goodbye yet. They speak to him daily. They clean him. They keep him company. At first, the visitor is disturbed, but the family assures her that it's temporary, just until they can part gently. Days turn into weeks. The father's body begins to decay. His skin darkens, his features stiffen. A faint odor fills the room, no matter how carefully it is cleaned. Flies begin to appear. Still, the family refuses to let him go. They insist that death is too abrupt, too cruel, and that parting should be slow and painless. They say this is their way of easing the pain. The family adjusts their lives around the corpse. Meals are eaten nearby. Conversations continue as if the father can still hear them. They speak to him lovingly, ignoring the visible signs of decomposition. The visitor becomes increasingly uncomfortable. She suggests holding a funeral. She suggests letting him rest. Each suggestion is met with gentle smiles and firm refusal. The family claims that forcing a goodbye would be far more horrifying than watching him slowly fade. Eventually, the father's body becomes unrecognizable. His flesh dries and shrivels. His face collapses inward. The smell becomes overwhelming. Yet the family still insists he is with them. They explain that the pain of loss becomes smaller when stretched out over time, that this slow decay is kinder than sudden separation. The visitor realizes the truth. This isn't about love anymore. It's about fear. The story ends with the chilling implication that the family will never stop. Even when the body turns to bone, even when there is nothing left but dust, they will continue to sit with it, talk to it, refuse to say goodbye. Their grief has frozen them in place, trapping them in an endless farewell that never truly ends. Used record. The story begins with a young man who enjoys collecting old vinyl records. He spends time browsing secondhand shops, drawn to objects that feel forgotten, discarded, and worn down by time. One day he finds a strange record. It has no label, no title, no artist name. The surface of the vinyl looks used, heavily used, scratched and dulled, as if it's been replayed far too many times. The shop owner hesitates when selling it, vaguely warning the man not to listen to it too often. No explanation is given. At home, the man places the record on his turntable. At first, the sound is barely recognizable as music. It's mostly static, muffled noise, and warped tones. But beneath the distortion, there are faint human voices, fragmented, incomplete, like echoes of conversations recorded accidentally. He listens again and again. With each replay, the audio becomes clearer. Words begin to form. The man starts recognizing phrases, casual remarks, emotional outbursts, private moments. Then it hits him. The voices are his. The record is playing moments from his own life. Conversations he remembers having, arguments he recalls, things he said when he thought no one was listening. Confused and disturbed, he continues listening, desperate to understand how this is possible. But the more he listens, the more the record seems to update. New recordings appear, moments he doesn't remember recording, moments he hasn't even lived yet. He becomes obsessed. He stops sleeping properly. He spends hours replaying the record, trying to hear what comes next, what future moment will be revealed. His own life begins to feel secondary, as if the record is more real than reality itself. Eventually, the implication becomes horrifyingly clear. The record isn't just documenting his life, it's wearing him down. The same way all used records eventually deteriorate. The story ends with the chilling suggestion that once his life is fully recorded, he will no longer exist as a person, only as sound, endlessly replayed until nothing remains. Town of No Roads. The story follows a young man who moves to a remote town for work. From the moment he arrives, something feels off. There are no roads. Houses are packed tightly together, separated only by narrow gaps between buildings. To move through town, people walk directly through yards, between homes, and through back alleys that twist unpredictably. The townspeople act as if this is completely normal. They explain that roads were removed long ago to preserve the natural closeness of the community. As the protagonist settles in, he struggles to adjust. There are no clear routes, no direct paths. Every journey requires squeezing between walls, fences, and houses. Over time, he notices something unsettling. The spaces between buildings are slowly shrinking. Walls creep closer together. Gaps that once allowed easy passage become tight squeezes. Some paths disappear entirely. The townspeople don't seem concerned. They simply find new ways through. One day, the protagonist watches workers seal off one of the remaining narrow passages between houses. They fill it with bricks, permanently closing it. The townspeople explain that this happens when a space becomes unnecessary. The town is constantly compressing itself. The man begins to feel trapped, as if the town itself is alive and slowly tightening its grip on its residents. As days pass, the man tries to leave town, but without roads, finding the edge becomes nearly impossible. Every path loops back inward. Every attempt to move outward leads him deeper into the maze of houses. Even the spaces he once used are gone, sealed shut without warning. The town has no clear entrance and no clear exit. The protagonist realizes that many of the townspeople have lived here their entire lives. They have forgotten what roads look like. They no longer think in terms of distance or direction, only in terms of squeezing forward. To them, the idea of a road feels unnecessary, even wasteful. In the final moments, the protagonist understands the true horror of the town. It isn't designed to kill, it's designed to keep. The town slowly removes all ways out, tightening itself around anyone who enters, until leaving becomes unthinkable, and eventually impossible. Honored Ancestors. Honored Ancestors follows a young man visiting his girlfriend's family home for the first time, a serious step that suggests their relationship is moving forward. The house is old and secluded, and from the moment he enters, something feels off. Inside, he notices strange, human-shaped bulges lining the walls. They look organic, soft, swollen, and unsettlingly lifelike. When he asks about them, the family calmly explains that these are their ancestors. At first, the young man assumes they are symbolic memorials. The family quickly corrects him. These are the actual bodies of deceased relatives, preserved inside the house instead of being buried or cremated. According to the family, keeping their ancestors physically present allows them to continue watching over and protecting future generations. As he explores further, the scale of the horror becomes clear. Entire walls, floors, and ceilings are made of these bodies. Some are so compressed that their features are barely recognizable, their faces flattened and distorted. The house itself depends on them. Without the ancestors, it would collapse. Even more disturbing, the young man notices subtle movement. The bodies appear to breathe or twitch. The family reassures him, explaining that this proves the ancestors are still alive in spirit, bound to the house. Eventually, the truth emerges. Family members are not placed into the walls after death. They are sealed into the house while still alive. Over time, they are slowly crushed and suffocated as the walls close around them. Their suffering is considered a sacred sacrifice, ensuring the family's prosperity and protection. As night falls, the conversation turns toward the young man's future. The family speaks as if if his role is already decided. By marrying into the family, he will one day become an honored ancestor himself, embedded into the walls just like the others. There is no suggestion that he can refuse. Tradition overrides individual will. The story ends with the young man staring at the packed walls of the house, realizing there is barely any room left, yet the family continues to smile proudly, eager to add more. The circus comes to town. This story begins when a small, quiet town is suddenly visited by a traveling circus. At first, the arrival feels exciting. Colorful posters appear overnight, performers parade through the streets, and the townspeople are drawn in by curiosity and nostalgia. But almost immediately, something feels wrong. The circus performers don't look quite human. Their bodies are oddly shaped, their movements stiff and unnatural, and their smiles feel forced, almost painful. Despite this, the townspeople attend the show, unable to resist the spectacle. Inside the tent, the performances grow increasingly disturbing. Acrobats bend their bodies far beyond human limits. Contortionists twist until their bones visibly distort. Clowns laugh endlessly, their expressions frozen in permanent agony. The audience is unsettled, but also strangely captivated. One of the townspeople begins to notice something horrifying. The performers seem familiar. As the story progresses, it's revealed that many of the circus members were once ordinary people from previous towns the circus visited. These people didn't leave town after the show, they were taken. The circus doesn't recruit performers, it transforms them. People who show strong emotional reactions, fear, obsession, fascination, are chosen. Their bodies are altered through extreme physical punishment and grotesque modification until they can no longer live normal lives. They are reshaped into acts, forced to perform forever. Some performers are so damaged they can barely move, yet they're kept alive solely to be displayed. Others smile uncontrollably, their faces twisted by trauma and madness. The circus thrives on this suffering, feeding off the audience's morbid fascination. As the townspeople realize the truth, panic spreads, but it's already too late. The circus begins selecting its next performers. By the end of the story, the circus packs up and leaves town as suddenly as it arrived. The tent vanishes overnight, the streets return to normal, life continues, but several townspeople are missing. The final implication is chilling. The circus will move on to another town, repeat the process, and continue forever, an endless cycle of spectacle, cruelty, and transformation.